I read something that said that Weekend in L.A. is the first of the live albums that you've made that you're really happy with. Is that correct, and why is that so?
Well, that's the first one I wanted to make. And though I've done some live records before, they were purely the record company's idea, and they came in out of nowhere and just rolled some equipment in and said, "We're going to record you tonight," with no preparedness at all. So it's the first one I had anything to do with. This new one, it was planned.
How much planning did you have the chance to do? How did you decide what to put on this one, for example?
Well, all we did was have a rehearsal with all the guys we normally record with, and we had a selection of tunes already picked out for the session, and just about everything we recorded made it on the album.
How much control do you have now with your current record company over what you record compared with labels you've been with in the past?
A great deal more. It's they value my opinion now, where before I didn't have any of that kind of clout. So it's a much better situation for me. It allows me to use more of my brain. You know, it's sort of a letdown or cut off when you're not able to express your total self. You know, you feel as if you're not being 100%. You're only giving part of your talent. And it's so much better. I feel much more secure when I'm, or at least that my ideas are being put over in their totality as composed to before, when I was just a guitar player on a session. Even though my name was on it, it didn't amount to much more than that.
On Broadway is in the top 10 now, and Feel So Good, which is by Chuck Mangione, a jazz artist, is in the top 10. There's a song called Deacon Blues by a band, Steely Dan, that uses jazz soloists and has, in fact, a jazz tenor solo in it, in the top 25 this week. Do you have any ideas why this is so right now, and these things are coexisting with the Electric Light Orchestra and various other hard rock groups?
No, I just think there's some elements in our music that people can relate to as well as they can relate to the other things that are out there. You know, I think that we people like myself and the Mangione group and a few others have incorporated the elements that people know and understand and that are today's concepts. I think we touch on them in one way or another, and people can relate to it very easily, so they buy our records.
And meanwhile, some jazz critics immediately go into the thing of, well, now he's playing pop music and he can't possibly have any jazz credibility anymore. How do you deal with that?
I don't, because I know that there has never been a man in history that has been accepted by everybody. I don't care who he is. The greatest example probably being Muhammad Ali. He beat everything out there and they still hated him. So, you know, you can't please everybody. Some critics will say because he didn't get beat up in his earlier fights that he was no good. He wasn't a good fighter. The only fighters they know is the person who goes in the ring and comes out with his eyes shut, you know. So the fact that he didn't do that made him no good in some people's eyes. So you're not going to please everybody, you know. You have to do, I think I was never successful in my career until I started doing what I believed in my heart was right to do and what I felt was right. That way, when you do get criticism, at least you're criticized for something that you did and not something someone else did. Realizing all the time that you're not going to please everybody. I don't care which way you go. If you go left, some people will say they wish you had went right. And if you go right, vice versa. So, you know, you can only be one person. You can only be yourself. So the more you can be that, and the more you concentrate and understand that, the better off you're going to be.
There are some people in the record business today who say that the best thing in the world in the grooves can come along, and if it doesn't have the right promotion, it's not going to make it. Not that promotion is 100% of the business or anything like that, but if you hide your light under a bushel, then you're going to, it doesn't matter how good the thing is. I wonder your feelings on that, considering that you've been recording for more than 10 years, but the Breezin' and Weekend in L.A. LPs are the first ones that have really had the great success.
Oh yeah, promotion I think is a great deal of it. I mean, you can sell anything, you know. You just keep pushing it down people's throat, and pretty soon they start to getting used to it. and then they may even get to like it. But they can get used to anything. Children learn how to sleep during bombing raids in wartime. It just becomes an everyday thing. It seems incredible that people can live like that, but they understand them. That we've seen it happen so many times. You can get used to anything, and we know that, but the world isn't selling jazz music or the esoteric music, esoteric jazz music. They're not selling that. The industry or the people who have the power to put the music out there, they haven't decided to do that. So what do? We let the next 2 or 3, or until our turn comes around again, or people like myself, I don't have 300 years to wait or 75 years to wait. I have to live for today. And this is the thing that critics want us to overlook, that we should let the music, stay pure, and if it gets promoted, then good. If it doesn't, that's just too bad. No, I don't think so. And I'm the happiest man in the world to get an opportunity to play some jazz music, but the audience isn't there. It's a shame, but it's true.
Wonder what changes you have noticed in your audiences since those last 2 albums came out, the ones that have had the particular success. Is it just that they're bigger, or is there another difference? Or?
Well, it's hard for me to measure it, but I can tell you that my audience, and I don't know if this is true of anybody else in America, that is, we have the widest range of audience of anybody. There's nobody in the States who has a wider range. We go from 8 to 80 years old. We have elderly people. Kids bring their kids, the babies, the Peter Frampton crowd. They bring, when I say the Peter Frampton crowd, his crowd starts very, very young. Well, we have that set, and they bring their fathers, mothers, and grandparents to my concerts. And they all come because there's something in one of those records that they heard, or that their kids turned them on to, that they liked well enough to say, well, I'll try it one time. And usually if we get them in the audience once, we get them.
One of the things that has happened since the success of these last 2 albums is that a lot of the other albums that you've done have been either released or re-released. Here's something that's from Billboard magazine, trade paper, this past week. Here's George Benson's latest album, and it's called Erotic Moods. This is an ad, about 1/8 of a page, and it says XXX rated new LP and single. I'm just curious if, number one, you know that this is on the market. This gives an address that the person writes in, a mail order album. And number two, if you recognize what is on the album, if you know what this is.
This gives you an example of how a person can be really exploited in this world. I originally recorded as a sideman on a record as a favor for a friend of mine about 9 years ago. This was not a George Benson recording. This was me playing background music to another man's recording day. This guy just decided to take a chance. He took a Warner Brothers picture. This was a promotion picture that we had, and he plastered it on the cover and put my name on it, and is selling it as a George Benson record. And he overdubbed sounds of people having sex on the record, just to ensure that it get the interest of the people. And I currently have a suit going on with this man right now.
So you recognize this name that it says to write to here?
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah, I know. Yeah.
Must be... Let me ask that another way. I'd think that the person could get a little bitter about stuff like that.
This one especially, because it destroys my image. Because some people, the public, unfortunately, don't know these things. They swear that I have cut an X-rated LP, and you can't tell them any different. I'm not there to tell them. And even if I told them, they wouldn't. Some of them will not believe me. They want to believe that I would do this, and it's that kind of thing that I'm talking about. I mean, that I would that critics pass by. Now they'll look at this album and they might hear it and even say that it's great. And there's no George Benson even on here. I mean, I'm playing background, A lot of the older stuff has come out, and the critics say that because I'm popular now, people will buy my records anyway. If that was the case, then how come those other records are not million sellers? They're out there on the market. They're everywhere. Everywhere I go, I see records that I cut 15 years ago, 10 years ago. But they're not outselling Breezin' and In Flight and Weekend in L.A. They're not even coming close. Some of them have been released 6, 7, and 8 times. And I don't make money on those albums because they were cut under an old deal that I'd have to sell 9 billion records before I got $1 out of them. That's the way they used to record jazz musicians years ago. Those are the kind of contracts we had to, just to get on record, we had to sign those kind of contracts, you know. And so those records don't do me any good. The only ones that do me good are the ones I just got, the last 3. It took me a year to record the album Good King Bad. It took me 3 days to record Breezin'. One of them sold 300,000 albums, the other sold 3 million albums. The album that took 3 days to record sold 3 million albums. The one that took a year to record sold 300,000 albums.
Why?
Well, first of all, the music became very plastic. The album that took a year to do, we were running in and out of the studio doing the things I hate, overdubbing and carrying on. The music is plastic. That's plastic music. Somehow or another, the critics love that kind of music. They say, they talk about being straightforward and swinging and just go in the studio and make a record. But the ones where I went in the studio and did that, they claim they don't like. And the ones that I went in the studio and was Mr. Plastic, they love. So who knows what, man, you know. I mean, I cannot, if you ask me about the credibility of, I can't vouch for, there are very few critics that I could even, you know, talk to and have any real vibes with, you know, because I know that most of the stuff is done in such a manner that they cannot even relate to. They weren't there when it was being recorded. They don't know the problems or what happened or my involvement in the record. Sometimes I have so little involvement in the record until I don't even feel like I was part of the record. You know, it's like I told you before, being a side man. The Breezin' album I had control over. We went in the studio and just zip, 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 zip. There were 4 first takes on the album. 3 of them were one and only takes. The song that won Song of the Year in the Grammy Awards was the song we only recorded one time. This Masquerade. There's only one take on that song, only one recorded version of that song, as far as Breezin' is concerned, on the album.
Was that a song that you had done before Breezin' came along?
No, never did it. We just went in the studio, and the producer kept sending me the song, and I kept trying to find something in it that I could feel for me. I loved the song. It was a great song, but I didn't know if there was anything that I could use. And at the last minute, we decided to try it one time, and we did.
What was it that you found in it that you could finally latch on to?
It had good chord changes. It had a good melody, and I could sing it or play it, so I did both. You know, I didn't know whether I wanted to sing it or play it as an instrumental, so I decided to do both at the last minute. And we tacked together a little intro just at the very last minute, because we hadn't even rehearsed that. But I stopped the tape for a minute, and we ran over these 2 or 3 chords just for a minute, and then ran the tape and came out with the record of the year.
And when you had done that one and only take, did you leap up from wherever you were and say, aha, I've recorded the record of the year? Did you have any idea?
We had no idea. Everything else on the record had felt so good to us that we, you know, we weren't particularly overzealous about this one either. I mean, you know, it didn't stick out as far as we can say. The only hint that we had that it might have some effect on people was Bobby Womack, the one who wrote the song Breezin', came into the studio while we were doing the playback on it, and he said, "Wow, who in here has a voice like that?" You know, and that was the first indication. That was the first good comment about that record. And after hearing it back, I wanted to do it again, and the producer said, "Hey, we could be here all night, and it would never have the vibes that came off on the first day." And he was right, so we got off of it, went to something else.
Have you gotten tired of playing it yet? Whenever people come to see you now, everybody is going to want to hear that one, along with a couple others that they know in particular.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've learned through the years because I've known masters. I've known men who became big success, who had enormous success, and I watched them get tired of their hits. And I know what happens to a man who gets tired of his hits. He stops playing them. People stop coming to the concerts. Can you imagine traveling 500 miles to hear a man play one song and he doesn't play it? That's what people go through. We have to realize that there are some people who are that much in love with what we have done. We have affected their lives in such a manner until they are ready to go all out. People stand in the rain. They stand in the snow for hours. I'm so embarrassed sometimes. I see people sleeping on the sidewalk the night before my concerts. It snows on them, it rains on them, and they're happy. When they come in, their faces are lit up. I don't know why. But you know something? I don't mind playing my hits. See? I know. So I understand what a classic is now. You know, it's like Duke Ellington and Satin Doll, man. Wait. And, you know, people will go through any length to hear Duke Ellington play anybody. They love Satin Doll. And it's just ridiculous for him to, if going to hear Duke Ellington and you didn't hear that. You know, so I'm used to it, and I have resolved myself. I have become part of me is public property. Part of me, just like Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel. I mean, you can't shut the door on that. You got to let the folks come in and take a peek at it. Just because it's your work of art and your artistry, they're the ones who made you an artist. It's because there's something they see in their eyes, or even the people who call themselves the critics, they're just people, too. You know, they turn the audience on and say, "Hey, this man is great," and the people say, "Hey, yeah, he is." Somebody had to do that. You know, it didn't. Compared to what are we great? Is what I'm trying to say. You know, I mean, there are some things that were considered very great yesterday that are not great today, and the time has put them in their proper place. You know.
I read that you had, when you were much younger, you were in a sort of a Frankie Lyman and the Teenagers styled singing group, and I'm curious what it was that got you out from that sort of thing, moved you over into the jazz area rather than wanting to grow up and become one of the Drifters or something like that.
It was easy, environment, and being the easiest route for me. When I was a kid, I was doing everything that everybody else was doing. Standing on street corners, trying to hum rock tunes that we heard, or rhythm and blues songs, or pop songs that we heard on the radio. Whatever was popular, that's what we did. Frankie Lyman was popular, so that's what we copied. And even though I recorded long before Frankie Lyman, I recorded years before Frankie Lyman recorded. And when the organ became popular, that's what I did. And when it became not fashionable to play rhythm and blues and rock and roll music, the hip thing was to go, and I found a way to make a living playing the other stuff. I did that because it became the easiest thing to do. I never thought I'd be no guitar player. It just became a way to make a living for me. Never thought I'd be a singer. That became a way of making a living. And I went back to singing because I had reached a certain pinnacle in the States, and I leveled off. Once you reach the top guitarist in the United States, that's it. I can't be God on the guitar, so I can only be the number one guitar player. Right? So I wanted to do something else to enhance my career. So I went back to singing. And it popped up out of nowhere. A brand new career all over again. It's like starting back at first base, you know.
Also read that you have had no formal instruction on the guitar. I don't know if that's correct or not.
No. My stepfather taught me the very beginning, the basic chords, G, C, and F, and from there I went out on my own. But I did it in bits and pieces. I've never been a guy, except maybe for one period in my life, that sat down and went nuts with the guitar, practicing until your fingers hurt, I never did that except for maybe 2 or 3 weeks in my life. The rest of it has been when I heard something. Maybe 2 car horns were battling it out in the street. I thought, oh, that sounds great. So I went home, picked up my guitar, and learned to play it. Or maybe I heard somebody sing something on an opera stage that sounded good, and that stayed with me. I went home and practiced that. But not until it goes, not the berserk practice that some guys go through and say, hey, music is everything. My wife and my family don't mean nothing compared to music. No. I've heard guys say that. Terrible attitude as far as I'm concerned. Putting things in their proper place has been the thing that's really helped my career. Because I know how far to go with music. I don't let it rule my life. It's just a talent that I'm gifted with it. And I use it to work for me and not against me. The whole thing is about living. And living to me is my family, my wife, my children, and that's living. Guitar is a piece of wood. Music is a pleasure, but it's not compared to my family.
Somebody said that you made your first guitar or one of your earlier guitars for $21?
When it became fashionable to have an electric guitar, I mean, that was becoming the thing. We couldn't afford it. The closest thing we could come to was a guitar in a pawn shop, which was still out of our reach at $50. My stepfather, after hearing me cry about it for so long, decided he wanted to go down to the pawn shop window and take a look at it. And so I walked down to the pawn shop window crying. And I said, there it is, there it is. He said, I can make that. And that's what he did. We went home that night and started carving my mother's hope chest up. And that's how we got my first electric guitar.
Do you still have that one around?
Oh, no, it's been gone for years, stolen. Grew up in the ghetto, brother, and you can't hold on to nothing. I'm lucky to be here myself.
Was it you or someone else at the record company who decided on Broadway as the one to come out right now?
No. Record company. I have some input on that, but they know more about that than me. I like to keep things in their proper perspective, you know. I mean, I'm there like, I don't want things to get out of hand. I mean, I know when things are going, well, I feel are going sour, and I will have some input. But I think they know about marketing. You know, they know that better than me. So I rely on them pretty much.
Same question as for this Masquerade. Was that a song that you had been doing before the Weekend in L.A. album for any length of time?
This Masquerade?
The same question as I asked about this Masquerade was on Broadway.
Oh, no. I had never done it except at the rehearsal just before we recorded the album. Yeah. We didn't know how we were going to do it. It just came out that way. I don't have elaborate arrangements to this, which is one of the things critics always jump on. They'd rather hear the chick careers than the guys who sit down all night. Now, to me, that isn't jazz music, because jazz music is spontaneous. Starting from bar one, the melody and all is improvised. And that part of me maintains. I will not give that up. All my songs, if I'm the leader, if I'm playing this song, I will play it my way. From bar one, it will never be, when I'm recording, it will never be recorded. We did it 6 times in those 3 days. We had 6 shows in those 3 days. And there were no two alike. On none of the performances, there were no 2 performances alike. You know, now when a song becomes a classic, it becomes a different story. Once you have put it in people's minds and they know this song, they know all the solos and everything. You know, kids in the United States know all my solos to all my records. Babies, they know every note. I went on television. I tried to redo this Masquerade. You know, trying to be Mr. Jazz guy, never repeat a performance. Right? Can't do that with classics. You don't mess with Satin Doll. And you don't mess with this Masquerade because it has become a classic. So, I mean, I never had so much criticism in all my life by kids.
What are we going to see in the next album? What can we expect for the future?
That's hard to answer, man. Because each day is different, you know. And those preconceived things that you dream up can work against you as well as they can work for you. I would rather wake up tomorrow and if there's something new bouncing off of a wall somewhere, I want it. But if I'm committed to doing something else and there's no room for me to take in that new thing, I feel I will have missed something very good. So I always leave it. I didn't know I was going to be recording Broadway. Producer came to me and said, George, have you ever heard Broadway? I said, of course. By the Drifters in the 50s. He says, yeah, that's the one, all right. He said, have you ever have you really listened to the words? I said, I think I know them pretty well. He said, you know that part about the guitar? And I said, no, let me hear that again. And then when he played it, I said, man, that's too presumptuous for me to say, I can play this here guitar. Let the people decide who can play and who can't, you know. That was my first impression. And then after thinking about it, I said, well, it's just a song. I said, let's record it and see what happens. If it comes out, we can put it on record. If it doesn't, we don't have to put it on record. So we experimented with it. I changed the basic phrase of the rhythm pattern from what is known as a 1-bar phrase to a 2-bar phrase, and that made it separated it from the old version right from the get-go, and the rest of it we let do its stuff.
And from the way you talk, it sounds like you really don't know right now a whole lot about what you will be recording on the next album.
I don't. I have some things working in my brain all the time. I eat, sleep, and drink, thinking about what is possible, and somehow or another it all comes together. but it takes on its own shape. I try not to force anything because I like the input from the other guys in the band. They make me do certain things that I wouldn't normally do, or they make me think of things that I possibly may have forgotten, or think of new things that I have not thought of yet. So I need all that input.
Thank you very much.